A man leaves a restaurant thinking he made the smart decision. He waited an hour after drinking, switched to water, walked around outside for fresh air, even told himself he felt completely normal before getting behind the wheel. 15 minutes later, he's parked on the shoulder of a dark road, staring into red and blue lights flashing across his windshield, wondering how a simple traffic stop somehow turned into handcuffs. And here's the part that bothered him later. It wasn't just the alcohol test. It was how quickly the entire stop seemed designed to pull information out of him before he even realized what was happening. Every question felt casual. Every instruction sounded harmless. Every small decision seemed unimportant, until suddenly they weren't. So let me ask you something. Do you believe most drivers lose DWI cases because they were obviously drunk, or because they unknowingly help officers build the case against them during the stop itself? Answer honestly in the comments, because what most people think a DWI stop looks like and what actually happens psychologically on the roadside are two completely different things. And tonight, I want to walk you through 5 tactics officers commonly use during DWI investigations that catch drivers off guard every single night across America. Not because people are stupid, because stress changes behavior. And trick number 3 is the one that destroys more drivers than almost anything else, because most people don't even realize it's happening while it's happening. Now, before we start, let's clear something up. This is not about teaching people how to drive drunk. If you're impaired, don't drive, period. But there's a massive difference between obvious intoxication and unknowingly turning a traffic stop into a stronger legal case through nervous talking, bad assumptions, and emotional reactions. That's what most drivers never understand until it's too late. Now the first tactic starts before the officer even reaches your window, and once you notice it, you'll never unsee it again. The slow approach. Most people think the officer is simply walking carefully for safety reasons. And yes, officer safety absolutely matters. But experienced DWI officers are also observing constantly during that walk-up. They're looking through your rear window, watching head movement, watching hand movement, watching how long it takes you to find documents, watching whether passengers suddenly become quiet, watching whether you keep looking in mirrors repeatedly. Even before the conversation starts, behavior is already being analyzed. And here's the mistake nervous drivers make. They panic search. They start digging through the glove box aggressively, reaching under seats, throwing papers around, moving fast because they think speed looks cooperative. Usually it does the opposite. Fast, frantic movement during a DWI stop often looks worse than calm stillness, because from the officer's perspective, chaotic movement can signal panic, concealment, intoxication, or all three. Now imagine 2 drivers. One sits calmly with both hands visible, waiting for instructions. The other starts scrambling through the car the second the lights appear. Which one immediately creates more suspicion? Exactly. And what's dangerous is innocent people do this all the time because adrenaline takes over. That's what makes DWI stops psychologically dangerous. Fear changes behavior before alcohol ever enters the discussion. Now let's move to trick number 2, the friendly conversation. This one traps people constantly because it doesn't feel like an investigation. The officer walks up smiling slightly. How's your night going? Coming from somewhere fun? Heading home? You had anything to drink tonight? The tone sounds casual, almost conversational, and drivers make the fatal mistake of treating the stop like a normal social interaction instead of what it actually is, a documented investigation. So people start minimizing. Just a couple drinks, only beer, not that much, I'm totally fine. Now here's the problem. The second you admit drinking at all, the interaction changes. Because now the officer begins building a timeline. What time did you drink? How much? Where? How long ago? What kind of alcohol? And under stress, people are terrible historians. They guess. They estimate badly. They contradict themselves. 10 minutes later, the officer already has admission of drinking, possible inconsistencies, and observed nervous behavior. And the driver still thinks they're just talking. That's why experienced defense attorneys constantly warn clients about roadside conversation. Not because every question is illegal, because people underestimate how damaging casual admissions can become later when written into reports. Now, here comes trick number 3. And this is the one that destroys people who genuinely believe they are cooperating intelligently. The exit test. Watch carefully next time you see body cam footage online. Very often, the officer already suspects impairment before the driver exits the vehicle. But the moment the driver opens the door, a whole new observation phase begins. This is where people accidentally hand officers powerful evidence without realizing it. The officer watches. How you unbuckle, whether you use the door for balance, how steady you stand, whether you sway, whether you follow instructions smoothly, how you walk, how quickly you respond. And here's the scary part. The driver usually thinks the investigation hasn't really started yet, but in reality, every movement is already becoming part of the report. Now listen carefully because this matters. Many people believe field sobriety testing only starts when official balancing exercises begin. Wrong. For many officers, observation starts the second your body moves outside the car. That's why some lawyers call the vehicle exit the hidden test. Because drivers don't prepare mentally for it. They step out too fast. They turn awkwardly. They stumble slightly on uneven pavement. They look down at flashing lights and lose balance naturally. And all of that can later appear in written observations. Now add stress, darkness, traffic noise, fear, confusion, and adrenaline. Even sober people can appear awkward under those conditions. That's what makes this phase so dangerous psychologically. Most drivers don't realize they're already being graded. Now, trick number 4 is pure psychological pressure, the silence trap. After certain questions, experienced officers intentionally stop talking. And most people cannot handle silence, so they keep speaking voluntarily. This happens constantly. The officer asks, "So how much exactly did you have tonight?" The driver answers, 2 beers, then silence. Now the nervous driver starts filling the silence. Well, maybe 3. They were small though. I ate food. It was over hours ago. And suddenly the original answer changes. Officers understand something most people don't. Silence creates pressure, and pressure makes nervous people talk. That's why some of the strongest evidence during DWI investigations comes from drivers trying too hard to sound innocent. The human brain hates uncomfortable silence so much that people will literally talk themselves into deeper trouble just to escape it. Now, think about how dangerous that becomes during a traffic stop at night with flashing lights and adrenaline pumping through your body. People stop thinking strategically. They start thinking emotionally. And emotional talking is unpredictable talking. That's exactly what investigators rely on. Now, the 5th tactic is the one almost nobody notices until later, the divided attention test. And this one is incredibly effective. An officer gives multiple instructions at once. Step over here, keep your hands out of your pockets, face my direction, and answer this question for me. Sounds simple, right? Except divided attention is exactly what alcohol can affect. So, the officer watches how well you process multiple instructions simultaneously. Do you forget one instruction? Do you answer slowly? Do you appear confused? Do you lose focus halfway through? Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Stress alone can affect divided attention too. That's why nervous drivers often perform worse than they expect, even if they don't feel intoxicated. And once again, most people don't realize the test has already started. They think the officer is just talking. Meanwhile, observations are stacking up rapidly. Now, let's step back and talk about the bigger picture here. Most DWI stops are not won or lost by dramatic movie moments. They're built slowly through small observations, tiny inconsistencies, behavioral reactions, nervous explanations, physical observations, speech patterns. And once you understand that, the entire stop starts looking different. You realize officers are not simply listening to answers, they're studying reactions. That's why emotional drivers often create bigger problems than calm drivers, even before any official testing begins. Now, here's another thing people misunderstand badly. Trying too hard to act sober can actually look suspicious. Overly careful movements, forced eye contact, exaggerated calmness, robotic speech. Officers see that behavior constantly. Natural calmness feels different than performed calmness, and experienced officers become highly sensitive to behavioral patterns over years of traffic stops. That doesn't mean every officer is automatically correct. Far from it. But it does mean drivers underestimate how much observation occurs before formal arrest decisions happen. Now, here's the smartest thing a driver can do during any traffic stop. Slow everything down mentally, not physically in a resistant way. Mentally. Because panic accelerates mistakes. Fast speech creates inconsistencies. Fast movement creates suspicion. Fast explanations create confusion. Calmness protects clarity, and clarity matters enormously during stressful encounters. Now, imagine two drivers again. The first reacts emotionally to every question. Keeps talking, keeps explaining, keeps trying to prove innocence verbally. The second remains respectful but controlled, answers carefully, avoids volunteering unnecessary details, stays physically calm. Which driver is less likely to accidentally strengthen the case? Exactly. And that difference often matters more than people realize, because roadside investigations are heavily psychological. People think evidence only comes from machines and tests. A huge amount comes from human behavior under pressure. That's why understanding these tactics matters, not so you can beat a stop, but so you stop unknowingly helping build the case against yourself through panic, assumptions, and emotional reactions. And honestly, that's the part nobody teaches drivers before the lights appear behind them. By then, it's already too late to learn calmly.